Hello, welcome back to my channel. We continue our lecture on the Nigerian legal method. Okay, this is the fourth lecture on the Nigerian legal method. In the last lecture, we looked at law, order, and freedom, and as well as law, justice, and other related concepts. So today we continue with our assessment of the relationship between law and other related concepts. Okay. Today we begin with law and the state, but before we proceed, I am still Mr. Bennett Iloka and your tutor for this course. It will be our pleasure, utmost pleasure per se, to have you like and share our videos, as that will be a kind of motivation for us to continue making related videos. Okay, so today we start with law and the state. In a layman's term, a state could simply imply where one resides or where one is from. However, in the international law setting, a state is made up of a different elements. There are certain constituents or components that define a state. Okay, first is permanent population. For a state to exist, there must be a permanent group of people that reside within that state. Okay, they could be different in terms of culture and values. However, they must all agree to reside within the state. For instance, in Nigeria, we have the Hausas, Igbos, Yorubas, and so many other tribes, as well as over 500 languages being spoken in Nigeria as a state. However, all these people came together and decided to be a state, and as such, they form a permanent population for the state of Nigeria. Okay, so secondly, it must have a defined territory. You cannot say that a state exists in the absence of a defined geographical area. No, for a state to exist, there must be a broadly defined territory or a given geographical space or sphere that defines that state. That is why when you go to the African map or map of Africa, you could see that Nigeria borders Cameroon and Ghana in Cameroon, Benin Republic, and so on and so forth. Okay, we actually don't have any border with Ghana. Benin Republic is in the middle of Nigeria and Ghana, although we tend to be so aggressive and competitive with each other as if to say we share a common border. Okay, but what we are trying to say here is that for a state to exist, there must be a defined territory, there must be a defined geographical location or an area that the state occupies. So Nigeria as a state has an area it occupies, and you can see that from the map. Okay, then thirdly, there has to be a government. You know, government is like the superior authority that enforces rules and regulation and administration of the state. For there to be an order in a state, there must be an element of governance, a group of people, elected, selected, whichever way, hierarchical, it doesn't matter, that are in charge of the affairs of the state. They are the ones that say this has to be done and this has to be done when. Okay, they define the budget and divide the budget according to different policies and objectives they have defined to attain or achieve within a given administration. Okay, these people that we elect into political position, the governor, the president, and so on and so forth, they are the government. Okay, so for a state to exist, there must be a government that is in charge of the affairs of the state. Okay, then finally, for a state to exist, it must have the capacity to enter into a relationship with other states. Okay, so when we talk about a fully sovereign independent state like Nigeria, we can see that we can enter into any form of agreement that we wish to enter with any state in the world. However, when we look at states like Palestine, where some states recognizes Palestine and some doesn't, then their ability to enter into relationship with other states is limited. Such limitation hinders the overall acceptability of that state as an independent and sovereign state as compared to Nigeria, where there is no such limitation. Are you getting the point? Okay, we could actually use the case of Biafra. It is quite a difficult topic to look into, especially as students in Nigeria, but we can actually adopt it as an example. Okay, although there are certain people that are claiming to be from the independent state of Biafra, however, Biafra as a state has no capacity to enter into any relationship with any country. Therefore, and the international setting, it is not considered to be a state. So for a state to be viewed, or for a given government to be viewed or conceived or accepted as a state, it must have permanent population, that is, people that reside within the state, a defined territory, its geographical area, a government, the people that administer and control the affairs of the state, and the capacity to enter into relationship with other independent sovereign states. Okay, so now, what is the relationship between law and state? This relationship is founded on the fact that law sets the boundaries and foundations upon which the state is governed and ruled. For instance, in Nigeria, we have the Constitution of the Federal Republic 1999 as amended, and it defines every aspect of Nigeria as a state and the duties and the obligations of both the government and the citizens towards each other and for one another. Are you getting the point? Okay, so another element is that it ensures in creating positions and defining those that may occupy them. It is the constitution that created the three arms of the government, executive, judiciary, and parliamentary, okay, or like we call the legislature. Okay, so this constitution defines who will occupy them. It states that the executives are in charge of executing the powers of the government. Okay, the judiciary are in charge of interpreting the laws, while the legislatures are in charge of making the laws. So these elements are a kind of relationship between the state and the law, because the law defines this position and who should occupy them. Okay. Additionally, it aids in creating functions and allocating powers to prescribe who may execute and exercise them, respectively. And finally, the relationship between law and the state is that law ensures in defining the extent or scope of exercise of authorities that are granted. Okay, so it limits the ability of a governor to engage or execute functions that are designed for the legislatures, or functions that are designed for a president, even though they are both within the executive arms of the government. Okay, so basically law ensures the overall effective and efficient administration of the state, because it defines the powers within the state, those that are capable of entering into these powers, how these powers can be executed, their limiting factors, and how they have to come together to form, a more productive unit. Okay, so in the absence of law in the state, then there could be chaos. There could be a kind of havoc, because people will tend to extend their overall ability to rule outside the provision of the law. So it is this law that regulates the affairs of the states and ensures overall coherence in all activities within the state. Okay, so now we walk into law and sovereignty. Before we go into that, it's important to understand what sovereignty is all about, just like we did with the case of state. Okay, there are two main connotations when it comes to sovereignty. First is that sovereignty represents a state of political independence. That is to say that the state of Nigeria can function on its own without external influence on its internal affairs. Okay, for instance, our election, we are capable of electing our presidents, our governors, our members of the legislature, and so on and so forth, without the interference of the external state. That is to say, the US cannot tell us when to conduct our election or how to conduct our election. However, this case is still open for argument, because there are still arguments as to whether Nigeria is an independent, completely independent sovereign state. Because you still see these international forces still meddling in our internal affairs, but that is outside the scope of this course. So let us just continue and concentrate on the scope of the course. Okay. So secondly, Sovereignty deals with supreme power residing within the state. That is those that we have elected, the government that are in charge of the administration of the state. Okay, so for a state to be sovereign, it has to have political independence. That is to say, its internal affairs are not being mingled with or tangled with by external forces. And it has a supreme power, government within that state that is controlling the affairs and administration of that state. Okay, so that is why we can consider Nigeria as a state, because it has political independence. Every 4 years, we go out to the polling booth and elect new leaders. And it has supreme power, the government within the state that is controlling the affairs of the state, which is why we cannot, at least at the moment, consider Biafra to be a state, because it doesn't exhibit these elements. Are you getting the point? Okay, so sovereignty and territorial integrity are inclined and are, as well as aligned together. As such, must be viewed as a single unit. They must be viewed together as a single unit. Are you getting the point? So all states must respect the territorial integrity of one another. So although Ghana and Nigeria are struggling as it relates to who makes or prepares the best jollof, that does not mean that the government of Nigeria should now start taxing Ghana for preparing jollof, or Ghana should do the same. Okay, so although we have these little friendly altercations, however, we must be able to respect the independence of one another as a state. Okay, so this is also where we go to section 4 of the United Charter, where it is soundedly pronounced that all members shall refrain in all their international relations from threats or use of forces against the territorial integrity of politically independent states, and or in any other way that is inconsistent with the purpose of the United Nations. Although this still raises some questions as it relates to whether this is applicable, when we consider the case of Ukraine and the Russian war. Okay, we also consider the invasion of the United States in Libya and other states. Okay, there tend to be some questions as to whether the territorial integrity of these or integrities of these states are being respected by the invaders per se. However, like we said, let us just focus on the cause. There will be time for extensive discussions as it relates to matters or elements that might arise from this cause. Okay, so per se, this is what we refer in the Latin maxim as "Paem parem, non habet imperium." That is to say, an equal has no right over another equal. So Ghana has no right over Nigeria. Nigeria has no right over Ghana and the international setting as a state. However, like I said, this always raises the question: has this always been the case? Is this actually what is happening in the world now, when we consider all these interstate wars, conflicts, and whatsoever we are facing in the world now globally as independent states and cooperative dependent states? Okay, going further, we look at law and legitimacy in a simple view, or in a nutshell. Legitimacy simply implies lawfulness or conformity to law. Are you getting the point? Okay, so that is to say, the exercise of governmental powers should receive and assent the approval of the people. Are you getting it? And this should be based in accordance with the law. So for you to be the elected governor of a state in Nigeria, or the elected president of Nigeria, there should be public approval. There should be public assent to your position. Are you getting the point? That is why, the recent 2023 election, there have been debates as to what went wrong and what went right. However, like we always say, this is not part of our discussion, so we just have to focus and continue with whatever we are meant to do. Okay, so this is well pronounced in section 1 sub 2 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. Okay, in this section, it is stated that the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall not be governed, nor shall persons take control of the government thereof, except in accordance with the provision of the Constitution. So if you want to be the governor of your state or the president of Nigeria, such office should be based in line with the provisions of the Constitution. Okay, so it has to be legitimate. It has to be assented to and approved by the people that you are seeking to govern. You cannot govern people by force. Are you getting the point? Okay, so now we look at the different functions of law: conceptualization, nature, law and sociology, law and philosophy, law, order and justice, law and freedom, law and the state, legitimacy, and so on and so forth. Now we look at the different functions of law. The first, which is also founded in the scope of law, as we discussed earlier, is that law preserves and restores order. It ensures that things are done the way they are supposed to be. It provides an institutionalized means of settling disputes as against the jungle justice, or what we call lex talionis. Are you getting the point? So when you go into an agreement with another party and you people have defined obligations and rights, if your right has been, if you are able to assess your right by the fact that the other party did his or her own obligation, then you have a duty to also ensure that he or she assesses her right by doing your own part of the obligation. Are you getting the point? So if party A tells you to fetch water for him in exchange for 100 naira and he pays you 100 naira, you have to fetch the water. That is what you are trying to say here. Okay, so it is law that ensures that the order are preserved and restored within the society. That is one of the main functions of law. Okay. Then second is suppresses deviant behaviors in the society. That is to ensure that man does not become a wolf to his fellow man, which is homo homine lupus. Okay, so although you seem to be religious, although you seem to be inclined with the views of your religious preachings, you must also ensure that when people are sleeping, you don't disturb them with your microphone. Are you getting the point? Okay, so because where your right ends is where another person's right begins. Are you getting it? So although you feel you have the muscle to fight, to destroy people, to beat up people, you must also ensure that you don't try that, because there are implications, there are possible consequences to such acts. Okay, that is what the law provides. It provides punishment for assault. It provides punishment for tortious liability, which is the case of public nuisance as it relates to the first instance. Are you getting the point? Okay. So thirdly, law ensures the facilitation and enthronement of social order. You know, when you agree to do something for another person on a condition, if the person meets the condition as per contract, then you have to do what you agree to do to the person. Are you getting it? So that is why we say law ensures that an agreement is fulfilled, and it makes an agreement to be equal and equivalent to an agreement. Once you have enjoyed your right, then you have to repay the other party by doing your own obligation. That is locutio contra mentem. Are you getting it? So an agreement is an agreement. It is law that ensures that each party in an agreement are able to fulfill their own obligations as defined by the contract of the agreement. Okay. So number 4, law constitutes and allocates the principal organs of power. That, of course, that is the main function as provided by Section 1, Sub 1 of the 1999 Constitution, okay, where it is defined that these constitutions remain supreme, and as you proceed further, you will see supreme over every other law, and as you proceed further, you will see how the different arms of the government are created, their respective functions, and so on and so forth. Okay, so law is also a tool for economic, political, and social change. Yes, our president goes to international conferences where he signs treaties and agreements as it relates to political gains, the people we can import from or export to. Okay, so it is these laws that are used to reach this agreement. It's also effective in a continental level. So, for instance, the case of ECOWAS, where different states within the Economic Community of West Africa have agreed on certain levels or ways to engage in different kinds of continental relationship as it relates to business, such as free movement of people, free movement of goods, and so on and so forth. So That is why we say that law is a tool for economic, political, and social change. Okay. 6. Law also reinforces the morals and values of the society, as it provides a framework for interpreting and evaluating these values. Yes, of course, we said earlier on in our third lecture that for any law to be effective and efficient, it must be founded on the morality of the society or the people that it aims to govern. What the people accept, what the people consider to be acceptable to them should be the foundation for the law, because in the absence of that, then there will be anarchy as well as civil disobedience, because people cannot agree to any law that is against their will. Are you getting the point? Are you getting the point? Okay. So basically, the seventh function is that it is used as an instrument to foster international peace and order. Of course, when you have reached all these agreements through the economic rule of law, then the possibility of peace will now exist. Are you getting the point? Okay. So if two countries are involved in war and at the end of the day they decide to settle their disputes, then they have to reach a treaty or an agreement as to what has to be done and what has not, and what needs not to be done, so that the overall peace and the affinity of the two states will continue. Okay, so that is what we refer as jus gentium, that the laws of these nations are fused together to form a single law for all the nations that are part of the treaty. For instance, ECOWAS, like we said earlier on, the free movement of people, free movement of goods, visa-free travels, and so on and so forth. You know, when the parties in the states agree to these laws, it becomes effective in all the individual states. For instance, the Ghanaians can come to Nigeria freely, Nigerians can go to Ghana freely based on the ECOWAS agreement. Okay. 8, and finally, law recognizes and protects fundamental liberties and freedom, of course. And this is most pronounced in the legal positivism, where law is considered to be law, which is the lex lata, and not what we feel, which is the lege ferenda. Okay, so if the law defines that the executive arms of the people are to execute the powers of the government, then that is the law. So a governor that comes out to start making laws or interpreting laws is going outside the provision of his office as defined by the law. So the law ensures and protects the fundamental liberties and freedom of what people can do and how they can do it. Because like we always say, where your right ends is where another person's right begins. Okay. So in this lecture, or in today's lecture, we have been able to look at law and the state as it relates to the fact that law ensures the overall governance of the state. Okay, we also looked at sovereignty as it implies the relationship between law and sovereignty, as to the fact that law regulates the affairs of the sovereign state within its spheres and its relationship with other states. We also looked at law and legitimacy, that is to say, for the government to be effective and efficient, it has to be accepted by the people of the state. Okay, then we have considered different functions of law as it relates to its ability to preserve and restore order, suppress deviant behaviors, facilitate enthronement of social order, constitute and allocate principal organs of power, as a tool for economic and political and social change, as a tool for reinforcing morals and values of the society, as an instrument for fostering international peace and order, and its ability to recognize and protect the fundamental liberties and freedom of the people. Okay, so that is all for today. Thank you so much for staying for the lecture, and we do hope to see you in subsequent lectures. Don't forget to like and share our video, as we hope to see you in subsequent lectures. Thank you so much.